You're listening to Seven Figure Fitness Business, and today we're actually going to be discussing our biggest ever mistake in sales. Now, what we're referring to here, G, is that we're talking about the necessity of actually having a standardized company script, sales script, or a sales flow. And a lot of companies that we see, or a lot of fitness business owners, they do not have a script, and it's a very detrimental thing for their business. Now, we didn't used to have a script or a sales process when we first got started, and I'm sure you'll remember what that was like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I used to be on the tool selling, and I really don't like selling. And I played a big part in managing the team then. And I think there was a reason we were converting under 50% at the time. Watching us grow as a sales team under your leadership has just been something incredible. It's increased.
We've kind of discussed this in other episodes that when we began, we were kind of doing a jack of all trades. So really, we were all kind of having some part to play in the sales and the coaching. Obviously, you were doing the marketing, but really once we started to define our roles and starting to perfect those areas of the business, we noticed a big change, and sales certainly hasn't been any different to that.
Yeah, and I think the big change is that we introduced the sales script, right?
That's exactly right. It took quite a long time. It was really at about near the end of the first year was when we actually mapped it out. And there was a number of reasons why we did it. I mean, if you've seen anything about sales, that you require some sort of a process, and we just hadn't done it because we were being busy. And the time that we set aside, or that I set aside to do that, was so valuable, because prior to then, we were having a number of problems relating to not having a script.
Well, we didn't even review any of our staff's calls. We had no idea what was going on whatsoever. The only thing we heard was bits and pieces in the office of chatter.
Well, and when we say office as well, we were actually operating out of a house. So basically you could hear people all around this house going through calls. And this is the problem, is that everyone was just kind of doing their own thing. Like, there was a basic idea that you needed to kind of be friendly, get some information, tell them about the program and get them signed up. But because everyone's system was so entirely different, there were so many swings between different staff, and also even same staff day to day, week to week.
Yeah, and I think for me, I very much sold from an authority position, because I understood the program. Having hypothyroidism, I could really relate with the women, and I had no technical sales ability at all. I'd just be like, hey, I'm your friend. I'm going to help you. Do you want to hang out? Do you want to keep on going with the program? And there was no actual structure for me.
Yeah, I mean, so what you'll often see is that when people start their own business, we're going to talk about fitness specifically. As the business owner, you're very passionate about what you do. You tend to be a really good professional, because you're the business owner. It means you're driven enough to go down that path. You've created the program as well, so you really care about it and you know that it works. It's very easy for you to convey that to the prospect. The problem is that when you start bringing on other staff, if they don't understand what you do, and if they're not a fitness expert, sometimes they don't do a very good job unless you have a very clearly outlined emotional sales process as opposed to an authoritative sales process.
Yep, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I remember, because I used to try and jump in and manage the team, and I'd share the way that I did my sales calls, and I was talking about hypothyroidism and how I felt in my story. And I was asking them to actually talk about my story a bit, because that's the business ethos, when in reality, that's completely deflecting away from the goal and completely unnecessary for what we want. And it was the introduction of this real script that changed it. So when we didn't have the script, what do you think the real negatives were?
Yeah, well, that's a really important point. So there was a number of them. First of all, a sales script means that you tend to get your message delivered in a really concise or a succinct manner, right? So it means that when it comes down to going through a sort of a logical process, when it's the right time, you're able to convey the information about your program without going overboard on the details. And that's incredibly important, because sales are not made logically, they're made emotionally. And what a lot of salespeople do is that they get to the end and they get super excited about all the value that they can deliver, and they just go bleh, and word vomit everything. And it actually makes it a lot harder to sell. So that's the first one, is it's the emotional versus the logical sale based on the structure that you can actually create.
I know that everything about my calls when I was on there, it was just extremely, extremely logical. And I think that's about the authority thing, is that I still come from that heightened position. And it was kind of like I impressed people so much with logic, but I often swept over the actual emotional side of things. You've said this to me before. There's a point which you can't get past. So there's a percentage that I can't convert past because I don't use emotion.
You were able to do emotion to some extent because you were able to talk about your own personal story to create a connection with them. And that was the problem with that style, is that if you gave that to someone else in the team who didn't have hypothyroidism, they weren't able to connect emotionally with the client or the prospect based on their own personal hardships and shared experiences. So that was where you were able to do it, is you would create a great connection and then you would go and give the details. And our staff just weren't able to do that. So we started to run into problems where our conversions weren't anywhere near what we wanted them or really needed them to be in terms of getting healthy profit margins.
Yeah. And I think that changed when we started to review calls. It was the introduction to the sales script, and the second part was going through and reviewing calls based off that script.
Yeah. So, let's go through a couple more of the things that are the negatives of not having a script. So it's definitely going to be less succinct, which means that your calls tend to go all over the place. You can have a 15-minute call, you can have an hour call. You have a lot less control when you don't have a process. The other thing is that a good sales process really should be sequenced so that it starts off more logical. You're asking information, you're getting details and information from them. And then it's incredibly important that when it comes time to actually near the price of the program, you really want to go through a journey of emotional questions that really put them in an emotional buying pocket. When somebody wants to consider the price of your program, if they're thinking logically, they're going to ask you lots of questions that are going to basically send them into like a state of a paralysis analysis. We want them thinking about how badly they need this, why they need this, and what happens if they don't do it. So that's another thing, is just you have to get that sequencing right. And when you wing it, it just tends to zigzag all over the place. And it's very, very inconsistent.
And I'm going to talk from my experience again. And that's what I really experienced, that inconsistency. I'd be on fire and suddenly I'd sell 6 people in a day. And then another day I'd sell 0. And it also, I think, like for me, your emotions then come into it very much so, because you don't have that consistency and dependable solution, right? Dependable, and knowing that if you follow the script, you're going to close.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, like some of the traits that I will see in salespeople is that usually salespeople are quite egotistical, and that isn't something that's said in a bad way. I think ego can be a really good thing in the sense that if you're a salesperson who's really good, the best salespeople tend to be competitive and egotistical. They love to win, but it doesn't mean that they're not caring and selfish. It actually doesn't mean that at all. So if you give people who like to win, who have an ego, and you give them a process, well, you don't give them a process, they are incredibly susceptible to the emotional ups and downs that is selling. Sometimes you have a good day and you feel like an absolute king or queen. Sometimes you get absolutely smoked if you don't have a process and you feel like the worst person on the planet. And then you start to question yourself. And we would notice that as well, is that some people in our team were crushing it and then they would go on a slump, and that slump could be for an extended period of time. These days, as soon as we notice that someone's having a slump, we're able to notice that, and then I'm able to give them an additional level of coaching based on our process. And this needs to be said, like when you don't have a process, it is incredibly hard to coach yourself, review your own calls, or to get coaching because there's no consistency to measure off. From a marketing perspective, you say this to me all the time. If we're going to change something in marketing, you don't like to change a lot of variables at one time. You like to control as many variables as you can and change 1 or 2 at the most, because then you can actually see what is and what isn't working. Without a script, that's impossible.
Mm-hmm. I know in marketing, that's exactly what you actually absolutely hit it there. If I make more than one change at a time, there are too many variables. And when I do that, I'm like, great, this worked. What worked? And I suppose that's the process with the script. And I know I see you do that all the time. There's always constant tinkering based on conversions and you understanding how that's going to make the prospect feel.
I think I can confidently say that our script is one of the most tested fitness scripts in the world, because we get on more than 150 calls every single week. right? It's a lot when you think, and this is for high ticket sales. So I don't know if there's another company out there that would be able to say that. But every single time we do a team meeting, we're either reviewing someone's call in front of the group, or we're actually going through and I'm asking my team what is and what isn't landing well. And we're looking at the process to constantly improve it. I'm not silly or arrogant enough to think that this is the most perfect script it's ever going to be, because the truth is it is constantly evolving based on what is working better. Sometimes we'll test something and it doesn't land, but sometimes we test something and it knocks it out of the park. Lately, we've cut significant chunks out of the script, which have actually improved our conversion percentage and made our calls shorter. So that's the whole thing, is like, as we're working through this process, this is a 65 to 75% conversion script at the moment, which is insane. Our whole team converts every single week between 65 and 75. But if we're not constantly reviewing that process and changing small variables, that becomes impossible.
I think it keeps things fresh as well. When you're constantly making changes, it gives people a goal and something that they're going to focus on every week rather than just being stale. And I know that when I was closing, I was always performing my best when I was having some level of education.
That keeps the team excited. The better your script is, the more enjoyable sales is, because when you speak, it lands better, it's understood better, you don't waste excess time, you don't tend to allow or accept tangents from the prospect. Sales can be boring. If you're on a sales call and someone's just telling you their life story, but it has nothing to do with the call or the sale, it can be tedious. So we need to get better at kind of teasing out the information that we want, which makes the prospect feel amazing. It makes them feel like they've been listened to. And then it allows us to actually put them in, as I said earlier, that perfect emotional buying pocket where both parties at the end feel that a sale is the ideal situation.
With anything, it's just like, it's got to be a win-win for both parties. And I think that you just don't find that win-win unless you have something in place that allows you to find it all the time. Because at the end of the day, with sales, we have a role. Like, we're speaking to people who sometimes want to lose 30, 40, 50 kilos more. And unless we actually show them the way, unless we find that win-win for both of us, chances are they're going to continue, go back to their normal life and gain 10, 20, 30 kilos more. So there's a real situation here where we are changing people's life. And by not converting them on the phone, we're actually losing them and causing them to go backwards.
Yeah, so I would say that 95% of the people that we speak to for a sales call, I genuinely believe that 95% of those people need what we have, right? Now, 5% of them are what we would call a bad fit, where for whatever reason, it's not ethical to sell them. They're just kind of completely confused about what we are and what we offer. But let's talk about who you're letting down every time you don't make a sale that you should have. I think that there's 3 people that you're letting down, 3 parties. You're letting down yourself because it obviously affects your confidence and it affects your income. You're letting down the business, which is actually paying to have you on board. And if you're the owner, it still counts because you need your business to be profitable. You need your business to be cash flow positive, right? And then I also think this one is incredibly big. You're letting down the prospect because they needed what we had. They needed what you had to sell them. And if you are not able to take them through to that process where they feel good about making a decision, I think it's a big loss, and it's a responsibility that we want to take as salespeople really seriously.
Sometimes people will talk about hard selling, soft selling. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, so I have recordings still that I cringe at where I used to do a hard sell, and I would literally feel like I was in a tug of war, and I'd get off the call and I'd be like, yeah, and then I think to myself, I'd be like, you know what, though, I was a bit of a dick. And like, I could tell that people would hang up and they were probably like wiping the sweat off their brow and thinking, I just got bullied. I hate that. I wouldn't call it a soft sell, but because it's an emotional, and it's a caring sale. So we aren't sort of relationship building where we're like giving people a pat on the bum, but we're making people feel excited about the possibilities. So we use, what would be called, I guess, the challenger model, which is a well-known book called The Challenger Sale. And it basically is about the fact that on a sales process, your job is to be the leader, but it's also to provide insight to the prospect so that they don't go, I agree. You want them saying, that actually makes so much sense. Like, I've never thought about it like that before. So it's really an aha moment. And if you can get it right so that you actually lead them through that process and you aren't too, I guess, either patronizing or agreeable, it tends to get them in a position where they are very, very excited about following your strong leadership.
So, yeah, I think that's the key difference here that I'm hearing you say is One, you're really pushing, telling someone what they have to do, where the other challenger model is that light bulb that like, holy shit, I have to do this or I'm going to stay miserable for the rest of my life.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just basically the challenger is essentially where you grab all the information that you need from the prospect in a way that makes them feel like they've been understood. So you don't early drop on solutions or anything like that. And then at the right time, you just package everything that they've said into a solution. And we have a standardized pitch for this and it works like a treat. And if they have anything that they sort of is a little bit contradictory to what you do, don't run away from it and think, oh my gosh, like if I contradict them, they might think that I'm being aggressive. You just find a way of actually educating them on a new insight and that makes them feel really good.
But what about our staff? It can be a complicated process. How do we teach them? And is it really complicated?
Well, yeah. So first up, no, it's very simple these days. One of my proudest achievements in the company now is that we've actually been able to systemize the entire process of training staff in this system so that we can get salespeople up to 60% or better conversions in the first 2 to 4 weeks of them coming on board. Now, that's incredibly important because that brings up another really negative thing about not having a script is that our training process, because it was so willy-nilly and everyone was kind of just doing their own thing, it used to take us about 3 months to really get an idea whether someone was actually going to be good or not. And that is so costly. That time, that training commitment from me, that took up a huge amount of my time. And I could spend 3 months to find out that someone wasn't actually decent at all. And then we had to let them go. These days, we can test people against strict sort of KPIs using this process, and we can get people up to an incredible level in less than a month.
What is that level?
Well, for us, we like to aim for, as a company, as I said, between 65 and 75. But honestly, from what I've witnessed, the industry standard is about 30 to 40% for fitness sales. That's from all the coaching I do with people before they come on board. And I like to get anybody to 60% and above. The other thing as well is most people are converting at 30 to 40% and taking about 45 to an hour to do that. And I've even heard people that are taking 90 minutes because their sales script, whether they made it up themselves or whether they got it from another mentor, is so about them. You know, they spend all the call telling people how good they are.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. I know that at different times, like my calls even went for 90 minutes. A business like us, where we effectively have unlimited leads aren't really the problem. The salesperson's costing themselves income, costing the business income by not doing a call in our allocated 30-minute time frame, right?
It's huge. It's an incredibly detrimental thing. I mean, basically, if you're a salesperson and you can cut your call length down by half, and let's say everything else stays equal. So let's assume that your conversion rate is, let's just go with 50% to make it easy, and you're taking an hour. If you can convert at 50% in 30 minutes, you can literally double your ability to earn income and make profitability for the company. It's insane. So it means that you become so valuable as a salesperson in the industry.
Yeah, and it's crazy. And I think that that's one of the things that people find working for us as opposed to working for other people. If you can complete a 30-minute call and you're getting, say, somewhere between 10, 11, 12% margin from us and a half an hour call, that's a lot better than getting, say, 15%, but having to do hour-long calls.
That's right. And actually, it doesn't even work like that, though, because the honest truth is that all things aren't equal. The difference between a 30 and a 60-minute call isn't, you don't convert at the same level. I have absolute stats to back this up with our team every week. The best callers in our team, the ones that convert the best, are always those that close, well, nearly always those that close in a shorter time. So I would argue that if you can do a 30-minute or a 60-minute sales process, because the 30-minute process is more succinct and on point, and there aren't tangents to take the person constantly away from the conversation that is being had, you actually convert better as well. So you can get on more calls and convert better if you get your process dialed in.
So would you say that principle is related to focusing on one thing at a time, right? So there's no clutter. All the person's thinking about is the one change that they need to make, as opposed to having 10 different distractions from all around them?
Right, yeah. So the way that I coach our team is that every single week I get people to book in and they'll do 2 call reviews themselves. And by the way, if you need to know the fastest ways that you can actually improve your calls, there's two things that I would suggest. Number one is to get a sales process. Number two is to start reviewing your own calls. When you review your own calls, what you actually do is you look for those major things that are going wrong. And I can promise you this, the first two places to look are that you're not talking too much, that you're actually listening to the other person is what I mean. And the second one is that when it gets time to find out why that person is doing this, that you don't accept those surface level tip of the iceberg answers and you start to dig. So just really quickly on that, when you ask in fitness, why do you want to lose the weight? Most of the time people are going to say, I want to feel better, I want to look better, I want to have more confidence, and I want to get healthier. They might say, I want more energy. And if you accept that, then no sale.
It's like I remember when you used to sell a gym membership and you're like, so what's your goal? Oh, I just want to be fit. That person doesn't want to get fit. They want to lose 10 kilos, they want to tone their body, and they want to be healthy and fit and be able to play with their grandkids.
Right. So our program, let's just say roughly our average sales price is about $1,600 on average if you count our two programs, right? Now, if I get to the end of that why section and I know that the person wants to get healthy, get fit and have more energy and just feel better, is that really a $1,600 problem? No. But if I find out that lady, that woman that we're selling to, that she feels terrible every single time she looks in the mirror and that she is really scared because she's got her daughter's wedding coming up in 6 months' time, and her like nightmare is to see a photo of her that she's unhappy with on her daughter's wall for the rest of her life, right? So like that's a really motivating reason. That's an emotional reason that says, if I don't do something about this, I'm going to have to go through that pain for a long time or perhaps forever. And what we do is in sales, we basically get good at finding out these real reasons, pulling back the cover and kind of digging into the actual crux of the issue. People might not want to tell you these things, but if you get better at uncovering the truth and uncovering the real, the core reason, then you will have people who want to do your program.
But the way I think of it is it's identity, right? It's that their identity, like when it's thyroid, it's like they've never, ever been able to be the weight that they want. With menopause, it's kind of like a lot of the time, it can be like thyroid, but most of the time it's that they went through menopause, they gain loads of weight, they feel completely different, and they want to get back to their previous identity. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, for our niches in particular, it's particularly relevant because these women often didn't have a problem up until a certain point. So they want that back. And that can be a huge part of it. So identity and emotion, I think they're very intertwined. So when people don't feel like they're either the version of themselves that they've always loved, or if they've always had a weight problem, the version of themselves that they would want to be, it can be very, very challenging for them. And once again, taking them through that emotional journey is very powerful.
Yeah. So the prospects that we're taking through this journey, there's a logical order that we take people through in the script so it flows smoothly, right?
I'm not going to go through all the little nitty-gritty details, but essentially what you want to do is start off by finding out information about them in what we call the investigation stage. So you're learning information about kind of where they are now, where they want to get to, and essentially what have been the challenges that have prevented them. We kind of find out what they've tried before. And then, and this is very important, we start an emotional sort of sequence that leads to the pitch. So we find out why. We find out what if they do, what if they don't. We amplify what if they don't. So they understand the pain, because pain is more motivating than pleasure most often. They believe that they can't do this on their own. And then we run them through a very concise pitch. Now, our pitch isn't like the pitches that you'll find in most fitness businesses. Most pitches are, we give you this, we give you that. You'll get this weight loss program. And they'll use like industry jargon, like you get our metabolism mega blaster, and all these lame names.
I like to think of it as the Hollywood tour. You hold someone's hand and you walk them around the gym floor and you're like, there's the treadmills, there's the weight section. It's kind of funny when you hear that, because I really think that as a physical location, people are getting sort of training. They're often paying for training. But in here, this comes back to they're getting that identity shift, which has so much more value.
So ours is based on 3 core principles that we use. And I guess what we want to do is have people conceptualize that these are pretty much airtight. So when they go through these 3 core principles, it's going to allow them to feel like failure isn't an option. So it's basically very simply that the program needs to be effective, it needs to be enjoyable, and it needs to provide them with loads of support. And if we can give them the right support in a way that marries up those first two principles between what actually works and something that will allow them to sustain the result long term, that simplistic structure there is enough to basically have them understand why any other program hasn't worked. They could have done 20 different programs, but if they're on the phone to you right now with weight to lose, that means that they haven't found something that was enjoyable or sustainable. Simple as that.
That's it. You hammered home something really important there for me. And it's embedded within the values, the ethos of our businesses, is that it's not just about losing weight. It's about keeping it off forever. So many times you'll go into a gym and there's like a 10-week weight loss challenge and it's like lose 10 kilos in 10 weeks. That's not at all what we do.
No. And so and this is where a challenger model can come in is, let's say, for example, if I've made my pitch and I'm searching for fear-based objections before I drop the price. Maybe someone says to me, well, do you give me a meal plan where you tell me exactly what I eat? Now for us, and you may do that in your program, and if you do, that's fine. You have to find your own way of justifying it. For us, it's important that we don't do that. And the reason is because we don't believe that that's sustainable. If I tell someone what to eat down to the finest little gram for 22 weeks, I have made them completely dependent on us. And we don't believe in that. So if somebody says, do you give me a meal plan? I think what the average salesperson would do is say, and then they'd sort of stumble and like try to make the person happy. Whereas I would provide insight to them and say, well, look, no, we don't give you meal plans where we tell you exactly what to eat. We give you guidelines. Would it be okay if I explain why though? And of course, they're going to ask why, and I'll explain it to them.
I really like the way you said that and the tonality you used, because I know when someone used to do that, I was the stutterer on the phone. I used to be the person that said, but we do this, but we do that, but we do that. And the way that you said it was just direct. It's like, we don't do that because.
Yeah, and so you slip into it's a non-aggressive but a strong lead position. So basically, and you slow it down and just look, we don't give meal plans, so I'm not hiding from anything. I've got nothing to hide, but I'd be more than happy to explain why. And of course, there's either an intended or an implied question there, and people, you can feel them lean in or get the phone close to their ear and. Yeah, sure. And then I would just say to them, look, for us, our core principles state that this isn't just about losing weight. I know that if you want to lose weight, you can go on any other program out there. The truth is that most of them work. And they just don't work long term because they're not enjoyable. So in 22 weeks' time, I want to have you feeling really clear and confident that this is something that is honestly easy and simple enough that you're going to be able to follow it long term. And if I can have you feeling independent at that stage, I'm going to be feeling like I've done my job. Essentially, I just make them agree by saying, so knowing that we are not prepared to give you a meal plan that makes you dependent, is that something that you're willing to accept? And I've never had somebody to this date who says no.
I love the way that you structured that. That's that light bulb moment that we were talking about. And I'm really glad you got to say that, because I think that people will understand exactly, okay, well, that's what you've actually got to identify. Right. It's that cost.
I'm giving them a paradigm shift. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly. That's so much more powerful than telling them what to do, like you called it the tug of war before, because I can really, really see how someone will decide in their own mind rather than being pushed.
Exactly. And ultimately, people aren't looking to pay you good money so that you can give them a kiss on the bum. They're looking to be helped, right? We're talking about coaching here. So if you don't have the strength of character to stand up for what you actually believe and to give them coaching and new insights, they're not going to be respectful of you anyway, because a kiss ass isn't going to be what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody. When you go in and see a doctor, you don't tell them what's what. If they give you the prescription, you're going to listen to their advice. It's about respect. And if a doctor said to me, Andrew, would you prefer the antibiotics or would you prefer this option? I'd be like, I don't want, tell me what to do. Like, this isn't my field. You know what I mean? Like, a plumber doesn't say, Andrew, do you want me to fix the pipe in this way or that way? It's not choose your own adventure here. They're here to be coached.
Yeah, this is the frame that you come in. Are you the absolute expert or are you coming in as somebody's friend, right?
Yeah. Prescribe the problem, diagnose the solution. That's the simplistic sort of mindset that we want to get the seller into.
it obviously works very well. Tell me more about the pitch.
So the pitch is ultimately, it's that phase where we make sure that we don't go logical whatsoever. It's emotional, it's conceptual. So that's where we talk about our 3 core principles. And essentially what we do is we just have them understand in a very succinct manner that they are going to need a program that is a genuine combination of those 3 things. It has to work. We know that. People have done programs that don't work, so that can be relatable to them. But most often where they are, right, that makes sense. It's on the enjoyment, right? So they're like, well, yeah, I guess if I'm being honest with myself, I have never found a program that felt like the rest of my life. Everything I did felt like a pain. I did that plan and I felt great. And it's like, well, what happened? How are you doing now? Are you still doing that? No, I'm not. Why not? Because, and then out come all the reasons why that program wasn't ideal. And then support is like, as I said earlier, it's like if we can help that person understand that if we can support them in a way where they go through that learning and implementation phase, where they do find that perfect balance between something that works, will get them to their goal, and something that makes them feel that they can sustain it, this is going to be the best and most successful program they've ever done. And that's the realization that we take someone to before we actually offer the price of the program.
Mm-hmm. And offering the price of the program, that's something that can be really tricky for some people. Like I know, like my close would be like, all right, well, that sounds like you're a perfect fit for the program. So would you like to sign up?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, the way that we do it, and this is one of the most important parts to just stick to the script. Like we've tested a lot of different things, and I won't outline specifics here, but basically when it comes to it, don't apologize about your price, and absolutely don't drop deliverables before the price. I think it just sounds like you're nervous. So a lot of people will say, okay, so let's talk about the price. All right, well, and just so you know, with the program, like we're going to give you this and that, and it makes, people start talking fast and you can hear that they're nervous. With us, we just say, so our program starts at this. With our action taker discount, you can get started for this. So it's that amount of saving overall, right? Now, that's one of the parts of our process is we're not apologetic, like because we feel that this is great value for them. And that, as you said earlier, it's mutually beneficial. We're not trying to trick anybody. We're trying to give people a high quality service.
Yeah. Why do you think it is people get nervous when they're about to drop the price?
I think it's a combination of things. I think a lot of people that get into sales, they have what's called like emotional disruption. So they worry about, they basically like kind of in their mind, they take themselves on a journey where they kind of get themselves in a tizzy thinking about what the other person might be thinking. And you can't do that in sales. You need to make sure that you stay in your own space. So when you drop the price, if you're nervous about the fact that the other person might think it's expensive, then that's going to translate in the way that you say. And ultimately, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy because they're going to think this person sounds like they don't feel like the price is fair. Imagine going in to buy something and having the person who sold it to you be nervous. You would be like, am I getting like taken advantage of here? Like something doesn't seem right. Whereas ultimately, when you become confident that, hey, this person needs this, right? And that's the mindset shift for the salesperson to be in. Don't be thinking, please get a sale, please get a sale. You need to be thinking, hey, this person needs this. I've gone through some deep reasons why. I know the cost of inaction. I know what happens if they don't. They're thinking about the cost of inaction. You're thinking about the cost of inaction. Feel upset if the person doesn't go ahead because you lost an opportunity to help them change their life. That mindset is a much healthier and happier place to be. But it also means that if you give it your best shot and they decline the sale, you know that you did everything you could to help them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. Like for me, I really don't like sales, but even talking about this kind of gets me excited thinking about, hey, all the things that I used to do wrong and all the things that you can kind of change, because it was the fact that I didn't have that clear line, that exact process of what to say. I feel like you have these key words, like these buzzwords that really result in success, that make it simple. You just say the same thing every time.
Yeah, there's a lot of a script. Like think about someone who goes into the gym, right? When you go into the gym, you've got bad form, and it's really important that you fix your form so you don't get injured, right? And then basically, if you're a moderate, sort of a moderate lifter, you lift with form and it's great. And then when you become an expert, you actually can stray away from the form a little bit because your foundations are so strong that you kind of get more freedom. And I think Sales is very much the same thing. When you come in and you're a rookie or a newbie, you need to stick to a script so you don't get hurt. You don't lose the sale, would be the equivalent example there. And then basically, as you become better and better, you will actually get to the point where you can start to really intertwine your personality and what works for you into the script more and more. And that's essentially the journey that we see with all of our sales staff.
Talking to you about this, there's a huge level of analysis. And I think that's one of the things that both of us have, like in spades, that we have in common, is that we're so analytical of our fields. Do you think that it's like, tell us, I know you listen to your own calls. How important is that?
It is, as I said earlier, it's one of the two most important things you can do. I mean, honestly, if someone says to me, I'm struggling to convert, regardless of whether I'm coaching them or not, I am not going to be giving that person too much advice if they're not listening to their own calls. Why don't we listen to our calls? The answer is simple. It's because we don't want to do it because we know that we suck, right? So if you're cringing at the idea of listening to your own calls and you're not converting, that is the reason why. When you listen to your first call, you're going to suck. You're going to hate it. You're going to be like, why did I say that? It's like you're watching one of those irritating movies. You're like, no.
Yeah, and you want to and you want to hit yourself in the head with a sledgehammer.
When you listen to your calls, you will be like, oh, I hated that. Right, write that down. I hated that. I didn't listen to them. I didn't get a why. I didn't get a deep why. And then after the call, try and go away from any call you listen to with 2 to 4 key takeaways. Write them down, and then the next call, and I recommend that everybody reviews 2 of their own calls per week. After you've done that, make sure that call to call, when you look at your notes, that the notes are changing. Because if you're constantly working on the same thing, it means that you're not implementing any change, right? And what will happen is you'll start with the big rocks and you'll slowly make your way down to the little pebbles, those 1%ers or those less than 1%ers. But the first 5 big changes that you make, as long as you're working on the right things, they will improve your conversion percentage by 10 to 20%. And that's huge.
I mean, I suppose you know you're the shit on a call when you listen to your call and you want to listen to it and you're like, that was good.
Right. And you pick out 1 or 2 things. I mean, you'll always have areas to improve, right? And I mean, everybody needs to be their own coach. You're never above that, ever. But without doing this, if you're too proud to listen to your own calls, then I don't think you're cut out for the sales industry. Simple as that.
It's like it's a life thing in life, right? Yep. It's not just sales. If you aren't willing to work on yourself and you aren't willing to improve and you aren't willing to face the music and go on a journey of self-discovery, how are you going to have success in any facet of your life?
Yep, it's closed versus fixed mindset. I love that book, by Carol S. Dweck, Mindset. And it's a very simple concept. If you are closed-minded, it means that your ego prevents you from learning where you really are, right? So let's say I'm not converting, but I'm too scared to listen to my own calls because it's important for me to know that I'm an intelligent and good salesperson. But if I'm not converting, that doesn't mean that I'm not intelligent. It doesn't mean I'm not a good salesperson. It just means that I'm making mistakes that I need to be made aware of. So take off the closed mindset hat, go into the open mindset where you think, I'm just where I am, and the only thing preventing me from getting better is knowledge and practice. So work out what you need to know, work out what you need to practice on, and go do it.
Yeah, I think there's 2 different things that are happening here. It's that little voice that's going on in your head, right? Some people have a voice that's going, oh, I'm shit, I'm terrible, and being hard on themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's other people who keep telling themselves how great they are, and they don't actually want to find out that they're not great.
Yeah, no, 100%. And both are really scary places to be, because I think the most crippling one is the one where you think of yourself as an intelligent person, but you don't like putting yourself in situations where you really test your bounds because you're worried about coming up short. In my opinion, that's the most crippling place to be. And I think nobody should let themselves get there. So if you're in that place, maybe go and pick up that book and see, or at least look at some sort of, maybe go to Blinkist and check it out. It should be life-changing.
Doing sales, you put yourself in a position where you are going to be scrutinized. You are going to be looked. You're managing people. You are going to be listening to their calls. So it's like, who are the most scrutinized people in the world? It's like presidents, prime ministers and stuff. Everyone judges every tiny little thing they do. One word said backwards out of their mouth. That's like the extreme example. That person knows that that's part of the job, just like a salesperson knows that they need to be able to, a good salesperson knows they need to be able to take feedback.
Yeah. And I said earlier that I really mean this. I think that most salespeople that are good, they're egotistical and in a good way, and they're also competitive. And that's one of the reasons that I think sometimes we as an industry have a temptation to sweep call reviews under the rug and pretend that they don't exist. But if you really want to become a 60 to 70, well, I'd say 70% plus closer, that's going to take you reviewing your calls on a regular basis. I've not yet met a great closer that doesn't review their own calls. And so knowing that if you're listening to this and you need to improve your sales, you would be absolutely crazy at the end of this episode not to go and create a consistent sales flow process script and start reviewing your calls against that process.
As well as that, not only listening to their own calls, that's a critical part, but also like any salesperson who wants to become really good, they have a coach, they have someone who's better than them listening to their calls, because you've got someone standing on the outside picking up things that you may not be able to see.
Yeah. And so like that's obviously a different conversation, but it is completely true. Like you only know what you know. So how can you fix what you don't know? And that's the thing is when you get a coach, same as anything, you're basically getting expertise in an area that you don't have. Someone with an outside eye and maybe a greater perspective is able to help you in changing things that you didn't even know were wrong. It's very, very important.
That structure that you have, like you said before, that in order to analyze a call, they have to have a structure. Well, the vast majority of our team are using your script almost exactly.
Yeah.
What are the key parts of the script that you take people through?
I think it'd be better to go through these really brief rather than actually sort of deep diving. I think that'd be a great topic for another podcast. But what we do is essentially the greeting, which needs to be succinct and on point and not long-winded. Otherwise, you can very quickly set a bad tone for the call where it's like we're having a chit chat. And that's not what a call should be. You're a professional. It needs to be professional. There's the investigation stage, which is very all-encompassing. But essentially what that is, that's breaking down, finding out what they really want. So where they are now, where they want to get to, why, and then basically what challenges they've been having. If you don't understand that, if you don't understand them properly, how are you supposed to make a solution? So you walk into a doctor's office, hey, doctor, I'm sick. And he goes, take these antibiotics. That's a crappy doctor. They're going to ask you questions first. They need to understand. We go through a pre-objection handling phase, which is designed to basically tease out fear-based objections before we drop the sale. I will definitely get into that in another session because that's quite a complex issue. That's huge. And then finally, we go into the pitch and the sign up. And obviously with that comes objection handling, which is also sort of outside of the scope of this episode. But if you get those basic points in line and make sure that you start off with logic and then you make your way up to emotion, you'll have them in the buying pocket if you do it well when you make that pitch.
Mate, it sounds fantastic. As I said to you, like I've really enjoyed talking to you about this because though we speak every single day, we probably don't go in depth into the details of sales. And I think like more than anything that when I've had education about stuff, it makes me excited about it. And it's so good to actually hear and understand how to improve your sales. And having a script sounds like the critical thing that I missed from my experience selling.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I guess that's why we've seen such massive improvements in both our own company and also the turnaround and the results of the people that we work with for coaching.
Well, everyone's winning, right? The staff's winning. They're making more money. The business is winning. And the factor that changed everything almost like within a week, within a month, whatever it was, of our percentages going from where they were up to going as high as 75% is that script.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that it's a huge thing for people to start implementing. Was there anything else, man, that you wanted to sort of finish off with today? Or do you think we've covered quite a lot?
We've covered a huge amount today, and I'm looking forward to, in the future, breaking down all the different elements that we discussed today, because I think there's tons and tons of value there that we can talk about.
Yeah, I think this might be an episode for people to go and listen to a second time, like maybe with a notepad and pen. And obviously, we will be kind of breaking things down a little bit more. In the coming months, there's going to be episodes about all sorts of different things, but we will certainly be delving into some of your high-level marketing and systems, and then also the high-level sales stuff that we run in the business.
Fantastic. Sounds great.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.